What's going on, guys? I've got something a little bit different to bring to you today. Today we're going to be talking about a rather inexpensive alternative to the official Surface Pen, which you can use on your Surface Pro devices or even your Surface Duo. Obviously, what I have here is the official, Microsoft Surface Pen. It's, obviously it's kind of the gold standard, especially when you're using these Surface devices, the way it magnetically connects, the feel actually of writing with it, the eraser and the button on the back. It's just a great stylus. Well, this thing is going to cost you, around that $100 mark. And if it's the slim pen, even more than that. So what I have here today is a stylus that is going to cost you about $20 to $30. And the question is, how close is it to the real deal? So I do want to point out before we go any further that this stylus was sent to me free of charge. So take that, into your consideration as to what my opinion of it is. I'm telling you here that my opinion will be legitimate, that it will be honest, and you can trust my opinion on it. I'm not going to say it's great if it's not great, but I just want to get that out there before I go any further. So let's get into the unboxing experience first. Obviously, on the front of this box, stylus pen optimized for Windows is what it says, and this is the K2 silver. It does also come in black, but what they sent me is the silver version. Pretty simple unboxing experience. When you pull this thing out, you're going to have a quadruple A battery here, which I've already installed in the pen. Let's set the pen aside for just a moment. One cool thing that they did also include here, this little grabby tool here, which you use to actually pull out the tip, and they did actually include an extra tip in the box. You've got a little instruction thing here, which basically says put the battery in it. It also does mention that if you are going to use this on something that isn't a Microsoft Surface device, make sure your device supports the MPP protocol. This is MPP only. So like I tried to use this on my wife's Lenovo Chromebook Duet, doesn't work, MPP only. So keep that very much in mind. And that's pretty much it. The extra tip is just kind of floating around in the bottom, so be aware of that. If you get it, there will be an extra tip floating around down there in the bottom. So let's talk about the pen itself. So the first thing I noticed about it was just the actual feel of the pen. I'm not sure what kind of metal it's made of, but it's definitely made of some sort of a metal, something fairly light, but it was cold to the touch, which I actually do like. It feels very solid. You're not going to be able to squeeze it and make it bend or anything like that. Something that I actually paid pretty close attention to here as well is the threads on the top here. This is where the battery goes in. You just simply unscrew that. Battery goes in there. Well, I've had a stylus before that was on my HP Chromebook X2, and the threads, when I tried to screw the thing back in, they weren't deep enough. And what wound up happening is they stripped, and I wound up having to kind of, I think I used thread locker to hold it in place. This feels a little bit better than that, so that's definitely a plus there. What about the features of this thing? So obviously you've got your tip here, which you're just going to be writing with, but it's also got two buttons here on the side, and one of them will toggle a right click and one will turn it into eraser mode. Obviously with the official Surface Pen, the back side is the eraser. On this one, you're going to continue using it the same way. You're just going to hold down the button, and the buttons actually feel pretty good. I'll give you an idea here of what they sound like. See if we can pick this up. And they feel pretty decent. I would say that the back one here is not quite as loud and clicky as the front one, but that's being very nitpicky. The front part here is also removable, and I believe that is how you use that tool to then remove the tip and replace the tip. But unless you're doing a lot of inking, you shouldn't really have to do that all that often. And then of course you've got your little clip here to, stick it in your pocket or whatever you want to do. So on the Surface Pro line, the stylus itself is magnetic and it attaches very, very firmly. That thing is not going to come off of there with any sort of force. I keep mine on there 24/7 and I have no fear of losing the stylus. On this stylus, they say on the Amazon listing that it is magnetic, and technically that is true. So if I attach it there, it will generally stay in place. However, not really all that well. I'm actually quite unimpressed with the magnetism there. And the reason for that is because there is no magnet in this pin. What is actually holding on to the side of the of the Surface device is just the battery. If you take the battery out, there's nothing else about it that's going to stick. It's just the battery sticking to it. So that's, when they say that it's magnetic, I mean, I guess in the most charitable of interpretations, you could say that is true. But if you're buying this thing with the expectation you're going to be able to stick your pin to it like that and it's never going to go anywhere, temper your expectations in that regard. But the most important thing about something like this, of course, is going to be how it works as a stylus. So we're going to launch whiteboard here. So immediately, one thing you're going to notice, that lets you know that this thing is working correctly, is that when you hover over the screen, you are going to get that little cursor that does appear without you actually having touched the screen. In terms of writing, let's say this is a test of this stylus. Now, I must tell you, let's not, judge my handwriting as a test of how this thing works, because my handwriting is absolutely atrocious. But it is working quite well. In terms of lag behind the pen, there's virtually none. It is very quick. It is very fluid. So let's try out the eraser button. So I'm holding down the eraser button, and now I'm getting the eraser. And there's a little bit of lag on that eraser, but that's more an artifact of this being the Core i3 Surface than the pen. That's got nothing to do with the pen. So on the other button, we've got the right click ability. So let's hold that button and click, and you've got a right click. So all of that stuff works quite well. What about in terms of pressure sensitivity? So if I write very lightly, you get very light lines. If I bear down, you get much thicker lines. All of that stuff is working just fine. How does it compare to the OG, the real deal Surface Pen? To me, the primary two things that are different to me are simply with the way that it feels while writing and with how the eraser works. So with the Surface Pen, when you write something, you just flip it around and use it like an eraser. And that is easier than using a button to me. But look, it's still there. The functionality is still there. So what about the actual feel? The coolest thing about the Surface Pen to me is that when you're writing with this thing, it genuinely does feel like I'm writing on paper. It feels like a pen on paper or a pencil on paper, and that's something that's really hard to reproduce, and it has a lot to do with the kind of tip that is on the pen. This one feels much lighter. It feels, there's less friction, and that I think is going to come down to what your preference is. The Surface Pen just feels softer and like there's a little bit more friction to it. All right, so what about on the Surface Duo? So obviously you know that the Surface Pen does work on the Duo, and happily enough, this thing works exactly the same on the Duo as well. The eraser button works exactly as it does on there as well. The only difference there being is that this right click button, I don't see that it has any observable function. It seems like it's pretty much just the eraser button, and that is it. But in terms of use on the Surface Duo, it works just fine. With the Surface Pen, I don't have a slim pen. Apparently the slim pen does this a little bit better. You can stick it to the back and it's not going to go anywhere. And the same thing's going to apply here as with the Surface Pro, that's just not going to work. I'm less bothered about the magnet thing on the Surface Duo, if that is your use case, because I don't think you're necessarily going to stick your pen to the back of your Duo and throw that in your bag. That seems like a bad idea. But so if you're using this, you could stick it in a pocket or something, and you're not going to lose it that way. You're going to be doing that with the pen anyways, unless the slim pen really does stick to that thing like incredibly well. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that the Surface Pen is worse than the Stylus K2 Silver by Vitade or Vitade. I'm unsure of how I'm supposed to pronounce that. But it doesn't have to be better. It has to be compelling at the price point. And when we're talking about $21.59 for Black Friday, $26.99 regular price. If you just need a stylus that's going to work well, that's going to get the job done, that's going to have pressure sensitivity, that's going to have angle, all the things that this Surface Pen does, and you don't care about the magnet, you don't care about, how the eraser button works, you don't care about having the button for the eraser, you're okay with using the little shortcut for inking down on the taskbar on your Windows Surface device, go out and spend a quarter of the price and get something like this. If you want the super premium, the end all be all, the best pen around, Surface Pen is this. But for a lot of people, this is going to be an absolutely sufficient pen. And if you just want something to keep in your pocket, to jot down some notes on your Surface Duo or something like that, it's a really solid option. So guys, that is my review, overview, whatever you want to call it, of the Stylus K2 Silver. I'm going to put a link in the description that is an affiliate link. So if you want to buy this thing and you want to support the channel, use that link. A little bit of the proceeds will go towards keeping this channel alive. Stay tuned for more coverage just like this. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends. If you enjoy my content, please consider becoming a Scary If Literal member. You'll get access to a whole bunch of emoticons to use with live streams and a shout out on an upcoming video. Thanks as always for your continued support.